Hello, today we will recap a 2015 thriller film, Careful What You Wish For, in which a young boy bangs his neighbor secretly, but he receives more than he bargained for. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and enjoy. The film starts with a scene of people enjoying themselves on the beach as Doug comes into a town. He's reading a book when he looks up to see a stunning view of the beach. He is driven into town by his parents. Their house is near a pier with a couple of boats. Doug goes down there and meets one of his friends, who tells him about the women who have arrived, and he can bang them easily. Later, Doug's friend then hands him an apron and declares that summer has begun. When Doug returns home, he shouts to let everyone know he's home, but no one is there. So he goes up to his room, and is looking at some pictures when he notices a new couple has moved in. The wife is lovely, and he tries to catch her sight, but she goes into her house. Her name is Lena. Doug continues to stare at Lena, but she looks up, startling Doug, and he turns away from the window. Later, he gets on his bike and spots Lena as she bends down to remove the sand from her shoes. His father later calls and takes him to meet the new neighbors. Elliot, Lena's husband, tells Doug that his father has told him that he knows a lot about boats, and Elliot invites him to come to see his new boat, and that he might even hire him. The next day, Doug goes to inspect the boat and sees Lena returning from a swim. As she goes to take a shower, he continues to observe her. Lena removes all of her clothes, and Doug is staring at her when Elliot appears and inquires about the boat. Doug informs him that the damage is mostly cosmetic, and Elliot informs him that he might be going away for a while. Later, Doug is looking through his windows towards the neighbor's house, and notices Lena changing. Elliot enters the room and tries to force himself on his wife, causing Doug to look away. Doug sees Lena walking by again the next day when he hears a scream. He rushes out to find Lena standing near the car, and she is afraid of a spider inside. He removes the spider and kills it. He then fixes the car for Lena, but becomes awkward when she approaches. He tells his friend about the encounter, and he advises him to be cautious with the husband, because he does not appear to be the type of guy Doug would want to mess with. On his way home from work, Doug encounters Lena, who is sitting on her porch. She informs him that she has locked herself out of the house, and will require his assistance to gain entry. She then asked him to keep this between them a secret, because Elliot had asked her to look after herself. When it begins to rain, Lena instructs him to grab a rock, break the back window, and enter so he can open the door. Doug succeeds in getting in and opening the door for her. She invites him to come in for a drink and hands him a beer. When the two starts talking, she mentions that he has a cut. She begins cleaning and seductively assures him that he will live. Doug then kisses Lena and apologizes for the bad kiss, but she is unfazed and tells him to try again, but this time kiss better. The two begin kissing, and then Lena begins to strip. Doug assists her in taking her clothes off, and they end up hugging each other. They wake up in bed together the next day. Lena compliments him on his performance the night before and inquires if he has ever been with a girl. He jokes about being a virgin, and Lena then lies next to him. Doug returns home and even smiles to himself as he recalls his time with Lena. He then goes to see his friend, who tells him that he dialed him the night before, and plays a voice that is not Doug moaning. Doug continues to stare at Lena, and begins working out for her over the next few days. He is working on the boat when Lena approaches him again. She tells him that her husband has sent her to check on him. When they get into the boat, Lena asks him to close the cover and begins flirting with him. She starts taking off her clothes again, and they end up kissing again, which leads to a hard hug. The next day, Doug is going by on his bicycle when he sees Elliot stopped next to a store. He stops and enters the shop, where he finds Lena. They exit through the back door, and he claps her again, but Elliot enters the store looking for Lena. When they hear him approaching, they stop, and Lena then kisses Doug and goes back. Elliot later inspects the boat that Doug is repairing, and informs him that he is leaving town for a few days. Doug takes advantage of this, by going to see Lena and banging her once more. They have an intimate conversation, and Lena gets him a phone. She informs him that Elliot is a paranoid man, and that the phone will facilitate their conversation. Doug rushes to the kitchen and Lena follows, but the gardener notices them. Later, Doug returns to the waterfront and notices Elliot standing next to his boat. He walks hesitantly towards the boat and notices that Lena is on board. He then requests that Doug take the boat out to ensure that it is seaworthy. Elliot is almost hit by a beam during the ride, but he manages to duck. Elliot then asks if he has a girlfriend, to which Doug replies that he does. The boat's engine suddenly fails, and Elliot goes inside to investigate. Lena takes a moment to tell him that she is thinking about divorcing Elliot. He then comes out and requests that Doug repair it. Later that night, he receives a phone call from Lena, who who is crying and informs him that Elliot assaulted her, and that he is away on business. Doug drives to the hospital and tells her she needs to call the cops, but she stops him and they return home. Later, while working, he receives a phone call from Lena, who is sunbathing near the beach. She invites him over, and the two end up hugging in a boat shack. Lena tells him she feels at ease with him. Lena then tells him about her husband's first wife, who is still fighting in court. Doug's friends then inquire about his activities, and inform him that he is seeing someone, but Doug just brushes these comments aside. He then returns home and notices Elliot has returned. He receives a call from Lena. He rushes to his room and calls Lena, who is standing behind him. She tells him to come over immediately because she needs him. Doug rushes to her house and discovers that Elliot and Lena got into a fight, and she hit him on the head with something. It turns out that Elliot is dead, and Lena tries to ask Doug for help. Doug then tells her that they will figure it out and that they must act normally. He goes to work at the bar, and returns home to find that Lena has come to meet his parents. After an awkward exchange, Doug goes up to his room. Later that night, he goes to Lena's house, and she apologizes that she can't stay in the house, so she goes over to his parents' house. Doug suggests that they make it appear to be an accident, but Lena tells him that this will not work. So Doug devises a new strategy, transporting Elliot's body to his boat, and tells Lena that she will tell the cops that they had a fight and Elliot left the house. A security guard spots Doug and addresses him as Mr. Harper just as the boat is about to leave, but Doug impersonates Elliot and takes the boat away. In the morning, the cops are investigating what appears to be an accident. He notices Lena speaking with the cops. Doug used a beam from the ship to injure Doug's head, and then set fire to the boat with alcohol and a cigarette. Doug then continues with his normal routine, serving a couple of cops who are discussing the incident. A woman is later seen driving to town. She meets with the cops, and informs them that the LA Trust is taking the case very seriously. Elliot had a sizable insurance fund, which is now going to Lena, so they are looking into any wrongdoing. The woman continues to investigate what happened, questioning Lena about everything that happened, and whether or not the couple had been sleeping together. Lena responds that she has had no extramarital affairs and then stands up, irritated by the investigators' questions. The cops are also looking into the case, and the waterfront guard informs them that he may have a suspect from that night. The cops then begin speaking with Doug's father. The insurance agent returns to the house to inspect the crime scene. She discovers the shattered glass window. The police also question Doug's friend, who informs them that Doug may be seeing someone. Doug becomes enraged and leaves. Later that night, the agent arrives at Doug's house, and inquires about the night Lena paid them a visit. She informs them that they would like to see Doug. By this time, Doug is panicking and attempts to call Lena, but the call is cut when his parents return to the car. Doug then answers a few questions at the police station, before being asked about Elliot's relationship with Lena by the agent. The agent tries to convince Doug to reveal the details, but his mother steps in and tells the agent that she will not let her frame her son. Lena sends Doug a message, asking him to meet her in the boat shed. Lena informs her that they must be apart for a while and then leaves. When Doug returns home, the investigator is back at his house, and she informs him that she needs his fingerprints and a mouth swab. They put Doug in the car, and the agent begins questioning him, but Doug does not respond. Doug then tells his friend and parents about his situation. Meanwhile, the cops find a match for the blood sample provided by the agent. Doug's attempts to prove his innocence are constantly thwarted, presumably by Lena. For example, a Harper's gardener who saw Doug and Lena together is murdered before the police can question him. Doug, on the other hand, escapes on his bike. He visits the watershed and meets Lena. Just as he arrives, Lena tears her clothes and begins screaming for him to let her go. She tries to make it look like an attempted rape. Doug is arrested, and he tells the cops that they know who he is, and that he needs to do something to clear his name. So one cop lets him go, and he rushes to Lena's motel to steal her cell phone. But just as he's about to look for the phone, Lena and the agent walk in. He claims that the phone contains complete proof of his innocence. Doug notices that the two women have the same matching tattoo as they walk away. Doug realizes at this point that the agent is Lena's lover, and has been her accomplice since the beginning. Everything flashes back to him as he realizes he was only a pawn in a bigger game. At first, it appears that Lena will leave Doug to face the charges, but as a final act of love, she decides to leave Doug the cell phone, which contains the exonerating evidence he requires. After claiming Elliot's insurance fund, the women are shown flying away in a plane. Just before the film ends, Doug explains how he was eventually sent to prison, but on reduced charges for a short period of time. So this was the story of the film Careful What You Wish For, Released in 2015. If you like the story, then do watch the full film, and if you want to watch more such amazing recap,